Everyone, and welcome to our video number 6, where I'll be talking about what happens after your phone screen interview and when you actually get to the actual in-depth longer interview where all kinds of questions are coming up. So I will be talking about a couple things that you can do before the interview and in the interview to make sure that you keep on moving forward and keep getting invited to the next step and the next step and the next step. My name is Olga, and I'm the founder of Revenue Hire, the company that helps to match people's passions and talents with companies' missions. So today I'm not going to be talking about what questions you can actually get in those interviews. That will be for the next video. That's a little bit more detail, but today I'm going to talk about the framework of how to be successful in the interview once you get invited to actually come on site, or it may be a conference call for that longer interview. So again, this is typically your second interview after your phone screen. So some companies have it as a phone interview that can take 30 minutes to an hour. Or some companies will actually invite you to come on site for that kind of interview. So here's the first thing you've got to make sure. By this time and stage in the process, first of all, give yourself a pat on the back. Very few people, percentage-wise, actually get to this step. In our experience, about 10% of candidates that we'll look at get to this step in the process. So you already did a great job being here. Congratulations, way to go. Keep on going. So at this stage in the process, you've got to make sure that you know one important thing, which is what is their process. And that is something I recommend you ask in your phone screen right before this to understand what is the process is like, what's going to happen if you get invited to the interview after the phone screen. So you know, are there assessments they're going to have to take, you know, how many interviews are going to happen after the phone screen, who are the interviews are going to be with. You need to know the framework. Is it going to be, you know, 2 more interviews after the phone screen? You're going to have to come on site. Do you have to have a panel interview? You've got to know what that is. And actually that is, you know, you're right. As a candidate, you are investing this time so the company can give you that opportunity and give you the knowledge of what will happen actually after, you know, in the process as you move forward. Now, here's the deal. If you ask that question on the phone screen and they don't know what the process is like and they're vague about it, this is something that you've got to ask yourself a question if you want to keep moving in this interview process. Because the company, by the time they get you to that step in the interview process, they've got to have their ducks in a row and they've got to know what will happen afterwards. So if the company doesn't have that process lined up for you, or they don't know what's going to happen and who the interviews are with, usually it's not a good sign for you as a candidate. And I would go and interview at companies that actually do have a process that is pretty straightforward, and they can explain to you what will be the next step and the next step and how do they actually make the decision. So that's the first thing I would focus on, is make sure you understand what's the rest of the process is like. So you kind of know, you know, you're in the marathon, so you're running, and there may be a couple more interviews after this, you know, and they only going to get more intense. So you need to know what do you need to bring to the table. The second thing I would love for you to know is you got to be super prepared for this interview. So as soon as you know that you made it to this step, you know, this in-depth interview, I would ask your person who interviews you, well, first of all, you know who the interview is with, what the title is, and what the role in the company is. And second of all, ask them, how can you prepare for this interview for it to be successful? They may want you to bring some numbers to the interview. They may want you to bring a couple references, whatever that is. Ask, how can you be prepared? Because that's going to set you apart even more, and that's going to help you stand out. So be prepared for that. And number 3, at the end of the interview, make sure you have questions. That this is, oh my gosh, so many candidates don't have any questions, or they have some questions that are just like so not relevant to what the interview is about. In fact, if the company is doing a good job with interview, they will set a bunch of time at the end, you know, for you to have, you know, 3, 4, 5 questions, whatever that is. Bring them with you. And make sure you don't bring those questions that are general that you can find out on Google, like when was the company founded and, you know, how big is the company? That's something that you already need to know. So bring the questions that are super important for you to understand, is this the right opportunity for you? Because if you make it through this next step, you're going to get invested even more. There may be another interview with a couple more people. You're going to have to come on site. Your time is valuable as well. Make sure you understand, what do you need to know about this company to make sure you can make that decision. So have those questions with you, make sure you bring them with you, and make sure at the beginning of the interview you make sure that the person who interviews you knows that you have questions that you want to ask them at the end of the interview. So to sum it up, if you made it to this next step in the interview, the company thinks that you've got at least the initial minimum of things, what it takes for them to keep you moving through the process. So treat this interview very seriously. I mean, you should be treating every interview seriously, but by this point, that means you made it through, a pretty big number of other candidates that did not make it through. So take this seriously, show up on time, and buckle up for the interview process. It's going to get more intense and it's going to take even more time. So make sure you're prepared. So know the rest of the process, what it is and what it isn't. Make sure you're super prepared. So you've got all those things and steps in the process lined up. And last but not least, make sure you've got a lot of questions that you bring with you to make sure this is the right opportunity for you. This is all I have for you today. On the next video, I'm actually going to bring you some of the questions the most commonly asked questions that people get that they stumble on in the interview process, and I will share with you what they are. And in the next video after that, we'll talk about the compensation, when is the right time to bring that up. So we will keep on moving through the process to make sure you get the job that you really want. That's all I have for you guys. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in, and I will talk to you guys next week. Good luck out there. Bye.